Okay, in the 1970s and 80s, Steve, while only a young child, was a member of the Brainerd Rotary Club in the 70s and 80s. When he and his family moved to Minneapolis in 1991, Minneapolis Rotary, some of you may have heard of them, number 9, told him that it had had too many lawyers already and they didn't have space for another lawyer. So they sent him over here, or he showed up on his own. I'm not sure which. Happily, we took him in. We're happy to have him. And he's been here roughly 32 years by my figuring. So I have one more paragraph to read. Steve lives with his wife of 53 years in Minneapolis. He works 2 days a week for the nonprofit Homeline Minnesota, which provides legal advice to tenants and represents clients seeking expungement of criminal cases through the Volunteer Lawyers Network. So now we can welcome Stephen Rathke.
Remember, no Justin's, no peace. I'm going to have to read this because it's got a lot of big words in it. But Matt Wessel is a geological engineer at Minnetonka-based Westwood Professional Services with 9 years of geological engineering and construction management experience within the renewable energy industry. Prior to joining Westwood in 2015, Matt supported the design construction of over 34 solar projects across North America and a wind plus battery storage project in Hawaii. Since joining Westwood, he has provided leadership for Westwood's growth in field-based engineering services within the power industry. That's the professional part. What I think he's really here for is the fact that he's the president of the Minnesota Professional Chapter of Engineers Without Borders, and also a new Rotarian at the Chanhassen Club. And he's going to tell us about his year in Guatemala. And Matt lives in Waconia with his wife and dog. So let's give a Rotary welcome to Matt.
Well, thank you everyone for hosting me. You guys have been a big part of our success in Guatemala, so really excited to kind of share updates from the project that your club has supported, and then kind of tell a little bit more about our story and answer any questions anybody might have. I would say do take Greg up on his offer to visit him in Talkeetna. I would visit you, but after I climbed Denali for the second time, I said I'd never go back. But Mountain High Pizza Pie is about as good as it gets. So I think the climbing is something I did a lot for some time. I spent a lot of time going up and down the Andes and meeting a lot of communities that just really lacked kind of some of the basic needs. And I think that was part of the big inspiration of what got me involved with Engineers Without Borders. What this picture here is, what you're seeing is a picture of our first school that we did in Guatemala. It was the project that I got involved with and really got me hooked on the work that we do and the impact it has on those communities. You'll see there's a foundation that has been dug out. That's about 1 meter deep and about 1 meter wide, or maybe half a meter wide, all dug by hand. So over the course of 4 days, we had 8 volunteers down there, plus probably about 30 representatives from the community, and we got those pickaxes out and we got the shovels. We kind of knew the geology of it, but the locals definitely knew the geology more, and so they picked the side that was soil and we picked the side that was rock, or and so I would say they made significantly faster progress than us. But we'll come back to this project there. So who are we? We are a variety of professionals from around Minnesota area. And in fact, as we used to have a lot of in-person meetings, and really when COVID hit, we moved to remote options, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and we haven't really gone away from that. For one thing, with us having, membership across the metro, out in greater Minnesota, and now we've actually added members from outside of the state. It's really kind of created a nice way for us to all work together. And I used to spend more time driving to meetings than I was actually. This club here through Bill Jackson. I saw him there. When Bill was in. There we go. All right. So Bill was in, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were in project management at Mortensen, right? So there's a variety of different skill sets that we need. We work both domestically and internationally. And really at the core, what EWB's mission is to help communities obtain their basic, necessity, the basic human needs, and really with a focus on education and water. Our partners. So you'll see we have a lot of, I'll get to kind of how we get our money, our annual funding. But really what it comes down to is a large portion of it is through corporate partnerships. So we have locally here, there's 3 really large engineering firms, Westwood, Bolton and Mink, Barr, all are headquartered here locally. And that is a partnership we have where they provide, donations to our work, and then also volunteers, right? They support their employees in this mission. And then we have other companies that are also contributing to that as well. So how we get our money, as I said, this was a breakdown of our 2021 donations. We have a report coming out that'll summarize 2022 here shortly. It just wasn't quite ready for today, but $82,000 in 2021 came from those companies, right? You'll see $30,000 from Rotary. I'll get to that in a sec, but that was the effort led by Minneapolis City of Lakes. You guys were the sponsor of our 2021 district grant, and we couldn't have done that without your guys' support. So I think it's really an honor to be here today and talk to you guys about those contributions and the impact that you guys have had with that. And these are, the different clubs. So our journey with Rotary, we successfully got a district grant for our first school project. I'll talk about that one. We got another district grant with the Rio Azul School that was sponsored by you guys. Our first district grant was sponsored by the Buffalo Club. And so through that effort, and then that's actually what brought me to Chanhassen, is I was working with Chanhassen to actually sponsor this year's grant. And so working with them, they have kind of like you all, I would say they're really, I get to go to a lot of clubs if you haven't gathered that. And so I was telling one of the members, like, you guys definitely have a good thing going here and should be proud of that. And Chanhassen was kind of like that for me too, right? It was just a good fit and on my way to work. And so working to get involved with that group and figure out how we can further the collaboration between Rotary and Engineers Without Borders. This was that 2021 grant that you guys helped lead. So really appreciate that $5,000 donation. And that was a catalyst for a lot more. And so worked with a lot of the members of your International Services Committee to, bring all of these people together to support our cause. We even had, donations from Brazil, Kentucky, and a lot of those were through the connections of this group. So pretty awesome. So where are we working now? Like I talked about, we've got local projects. We'll talk about Rio Azul, Santa Elena in Guatemala, and then I'll just lightly touch on the Peru project just to give you an idea of another project that we have going. So our local projects team, this was something that really came out of COVID and kind of post George Floyd. With everything going on, we really wanted to look locally and figure out what we could do. And so we developed a team focused around that and trying to find local opportunities. I think at that same time, homelessness was kind of a rising issue locally, and was something that we thought we could help contribute to and provide solutions for. And so a really natural fit became a partnership with Beacon Interfaith Housing. They have a variety of housing units across the Twin Cities area, and wanted to make it more energy efficient, right? Like leverage that engineering expertise we have and see how we could help. So that team, our local projects team has been working collaboratively with their building maintenance group, trying to come up with ideas and work through those types of things. And they have a variety of other projects, but this was a good one to highlight. I mentioned the Peru project here. I'll kind of go through this quickly, but we do have a large water project in Peru. Peru is a country that is supported by EWB USA, but EWB USA does not have any dedicated presence in that country. So the work that gets done through local NGOs and partnerships, which means they're on a little bit of a different timeline. This project, this group adopted it kind of in late 2018, and they're still kind of chugging along, making the progress. And Bill can kind of attest, he's been working in Honduras without an EWB USA infrastructure kind of on the boots, on the ground that's helping to drive it. And the timelines are just different. So I would expect the group is pretty close to finishing up this one this year, with probably some work carrying into. So they'll be on probably about a 5 or 6 year timeline, where a lot of the projects in Guatemala we'll talk about are on a 2-year timeline. So. And this one was really, they were really impacted, the remoteness of their project, right? They got just to get to it, it's a 15-hour flight, 1.45 hour, another flight. And then you got to drive, upwards of 9 hours just to get there. Right. So just logistically, it's really tough. And with COVID, it was really tough for them to get the data they need to make the progress, to have the communication stuff. Some pictures kind of from this. They went down in 2019, did what we call an assessment trip, preliminary engineering work. Fall 2021, the big milestone for the team, right? Through COVID, through all those logistical challenges, they were able to work with a contractor and they were able to get running water for the community. And so you can just see kind of the elation of the staff as they started pumping that out. And this is a community that just hasn't had water. So just even to have that, even without the distribution system, was a big win. And that's one thing with COVID too, what EWB found out is that actually the need for water in communities has just increased significantly. What was happening is communities that didn't have water were forced to leave the safety of their community and go to other communities, which then caused COVID exposure, and they would bring that back. And so that was something that, kind of an unforeseen consequence of lack of water that wasn't anticipated. 2023, these are pictures I literally just took out of I'll show you, we get updates via WhatsApp. And so I get random pictures all the time of the progress on our projects. And so these are ones that just came in. And so they're right now they're focused on building infrastructure to support what'll be the storage tanks for that system. So a concrete slab with a roof structure there. And then there'll be tanks inside of there. So let's focus on Guatemala. This is the first project. So the initial slide I showed you was the foundation. This was our Potsec Elementary School project. Some background, my involvement with EWB really started when there was an employee at Westwood that they were struggling. They went down there. They had a young group of engineers. They adopted this project. They traveled to Guatemala. They made a commitment to the community that says, we will start construction in 6 to 7 months. And then they all came back to Minnesota and said, how do we do that? And I was in my role at Westwood and stuff. I play a large mentor role. And so they reached out to me specifically wondering how to design a school, because that was not a skill set that anybody on the team had, but then also how to fundraise. And so they needed $70,000 at that time to make that a reality. We got it done. I will say when we towards the end of this, after our travel, we sat in Antigua, Guatemala, which if you haven't been, it's just absolutely gorgeous. But we sat there and we're like, all right, this was a grind. How do we not do this again? Right. And so that's really what's motivated me. I think that trip, I was pretty burnt out going to this project. But we did things like this. Like this is from our trip in 2019. We played soccer with the kids. I had the drone out, and if you ever want to be the most popular person on a project site, bring the drone, right? Like it is like we will have just a crowd at all times. This was like my energy went from 0 to like 300% after this. And so after this project, after this week, as we're digging holes, making concrete by hand, this is a nice aerial shot of just the system in place using labor and kind of, more, not the methods we're using here to get that done. But then, you know, this is down the road. But like we said in Antigua and said, there's a better way. And when you're coming off that, you know, the energy that you get from this, there's motivation, there's initiative, right? So it's really from that point forth, we really kind of revamped our model with a focus on Guatemala, which we'll continue to talk about here. And that's largely because there's a support network. We're able to get projects done efficiently. We're able to put money to good use. Yeah, it's just been really good. And so this is what that first project looked like. This is our first school. If the previous school was an adobe structure, they had there was earthquakes activity previously. And so it was kind of cracking. It had no windows, right? Like one of the biggest things was just getting natural light. And I think to go for the community, they view a brick structure. This is a confined masonry construction. That's really viewed to the local group as how do I say it? Just really rich, right? To have a brick building, you're rich, right? And it's not a mud building and stuff. And so while it might look like a really basic structure for us, like this is a Cadillac to that community. And it's a really shared space that they have. And so that overhang, you know, this is just a community gathering space that they have. Part two, this is what our first district grant was to actually build some supporting infrastructure to make sure that the school lasts for years to come. So there was a bank where kind of below the school that was actually in between the existing school that they had and our school that we built, that was, you know, with the significant rains, and they do get really heavy rains in the rainy season, that bank was eroding. We had watched it erode over 2 or 3 years. And so we wanted to shore that up. We needed a retaining wall that was going to really prevent that from progressing further. And then, you know, all the dirt that's there was then stabilized. We were able to kind of slope it back and stabilize it. Bathrooms, they really didn't have much. And what they had was a former latrine that was just, you could hardly get near it. We actually proposed a really nice bathroom solution to them using kind of modern technologies that are being used in developing countries. They said no. They said, we really just want a pit latrine system because the waste product is actually of value to our community. So they use that as fertilizer. So the system we built here is actually there's a men's and a women's stall. But there's actually the sub below that is actually 2 holding tanks. So they use one set of holding tanks for a year, let that fill up. And then that structure, they just take it, they move it over to the other holding tanks, let that waste sit for a year. And then we created access, and that's where they can, you know, essentially mine it for the fertilizer activity. And then they'll repeat that process again. And that was, you know, what kind of the collaboration between what their objectives were and our, you know, trying to develop a long-term solution. That's where we ended up. And we got, you know, post-COVID, we finally got to travel. So we went down there in May of 2022, celebrated with the community. There's going to be another celebration like this for the project we're going to talk about next, the Rio Azul one, which is what the Minneapolis City of Lakes has helped us work on. And so hopefully, you know, there'll be some members that'll get to travel with us for that celebration. I've heard anywhere this was like quite the day. Like, I mean, they had dignitaries and speakers and food for everybody. And I mean, it was really impressive at the party that they threw. I've heard that there's other ones that are like a full 3 days, you know, and it's like, you know, so it just kind of depends on how excited that community is and maybe how large. I think this next one might be actually pretty big. So, and there on the right is the mayor. So in this local municipality, the water project I'm going to talk about is actually within that same municipality too. He's now made it through 2 elections. So that's actually pretty impressive. And he's really building relationships with that community. And we have a strong relationship with him, which means that we get access to some of the municipality funding for our projects and stuff. Most projects are a partnership where the local governments are usually paying about anywhere from 20 to 30% of the cost. The community usually does about 5% and then provides labor. And then, you know, we're usually funding the balance of the material costs and stuff. So Rio Azul School, that is a nice diagram of the school the community wanted. They had that diagram because they had been trying to build the school for over 10 years, trying to find a partner to help them build a high school for their community. A rather large community of 2,000 people. that didn't have any sort of secondary education option for their students. So if students wanted to pursue a secondary education, they had to go elsewhere. I think to maybe back up a little bit, in Guatemala, you have primary education, they call it, or primary schools, and then secondary schools. So the primary typically goes up to somewhere in like that middle school range that we would have here. That's pretty standard. Most kids will go through that. High school or secondary school is really optional, and it usually comes at a cost. So a family has to be really committed. They have to have the financial means. They have to, have not necessarily a need for that child to go into the workforce. Like there's just a variety of reasons why secondary education is hard to obtain, let alone if you don't have one in your community, right? So hence why, the community leaders were really trying to invest in their community, invest in the education for their people. And it took them, 10 plus years to actually find a partner. And that was one of the things when we went down to visit our construction of this, the overwhelming gratitude, the appreciation, it was just evident, and we got, hosted in a big way. So Rio Azul is a 7-class, the overall project once complete will be 7 classrooms, have a couple admin rooms, it'll have a kitchen, it'll have a nice bathroom structure, kind of that more modern bathroom that we had tried to propose at the other school. It was broken up into 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2. So phase 1 was 5 classrooms, the admin rooms and the bathrooms, basically get them a functional thing so they could start to use it. And then phase 2 is some of the supporting, so a sport court, an athletic court there that'll help for recreation, and then 2 additional classrooms. So, right. They'll pretty much only play soccer on that thing. One thing if you ever visit Latin America, they all have, I don't know if the NBA is paying people or what, but there's basketball hoops in all these courts. And when I go down, I'm a big basketball guy. I was kind of up too late watching our Timberwolves lose last night. But so I always play with them, and yeah, I'm kind of a lot taller, even from the adults. So I have an unfair advantage. Yeah. So we visited the school in May of 2022. This was the first time we had ever stepped foot on site. We adopted this project during COVID. We worked with our in-country office to do surveys, to get imagery and all of that. There were things that got missed, right? There was specifically this corner where we just did not have a good understanding of the topography and the challenge there. And so we had to do field engineering. And that's what we spent most of our trip. So you can literally see, like, this was a sketch that I made to just try to get the vision across to a structural engineer who wasn't there. So we could really build this really impressive retaining wall. I'll get a picture to it next. And it still amazes me that our team had the capabilities and the know-how and the expertise to meet this challenge. For a lot of people that don't design schools for our professional, like we're learning a lot of this stuff, and it's kind of a continuing education for us. Kind of an overall, this is a panoramic, so it's a bit distorted, but gives you kind of an idea that the project, it's a pretty hilly region. So to find a semi-flat spot, the community actually kind of did a cut and found, a spot for the school to sit there. So. But yeah, so that's us after working on site, helping with the masons and our foremen. So we do have some dedicated labor that is specialty labor. So people that have been schools that are kind of able to help guide it. They provide us with updates and make sure that our money is being spent properly and the proper accounting and all of that. And then the picture on the right is the community hosted a big welcome ceremony for us at the school. They had the kids prepared a program for us. And then, the big picture. So, it's pretty impressive. This is so I know one of the big things I wanted to get to today was what's going on, what happened with that construction, how did that money get used, and where did it go? So I think first things first, as I talked about, we get regular updates from those people down there. That picture on the left, or I guess on the left for you all, is our WhatsApp chat. It's really basic. That becomes our RFI. If anybody is familiar with engineering of RFIs, requests for information, there's change orders, like all of that. We just kind of all do it in that, right? It's a nice streamlined form of communication. They're sending progress reports and stuff through that. And the snip there was like, I'll show you some slides of where we're at, but like that's the celebration that's happening in real time, amongst us and stuff. And they sent a video saying thank you and how excited they are and all of that great stuff. But yeah, this is specific to what our district grant helped fund. So I'm going to go back to this slide. What I maybe didn't call out was that yellow circle. That was the specific carve out for the district grant. So that was kind of the $30,000 piece that we applied to that project, which was the bathrooms and the kitchen facility there. And this is what that looked like in construction there. So really, I mean, just a pretty large structure, and you'll see it evolve as we worked with the earth to kind of to form it and built retaining walls. You know, and that big tank is the more modern, that's called a biodigester. So that helps kind of create sludge or takes the waste and makes it more manageable. And then we have a drain field for the liquids. Just kind of more progress pictures. You can see down, you know, on the far left there is that bathroom, but those are the 5 classrooms that are being built. I think these were the pictures that just kind of show the scale of the challenge that we had to overcome on that corner, just a really large wall. And I remember even when we sent the wall design back, they're like, you really want it that thick? You really want it that tall? Like, well, we don't really have a choice. And, but they, you know, also too, like, I just don't, you know, ours was backed with calcs and wanted to make sure this thing was going to last for 30, 40 years, seismic loads. And when we got pushback from them locally, you could just tell that wasn't necessarily the way they would have approached it. Right. You know, but also I think, you know, so it's just, we oftentimes overcome just those differences in understanding of kind of means and methods on some of that stuff, but we get through it. Interior, we got windows going in, super bright. They started, you know, put a white coat of paint on, which we'll soon see it change to yellow. Yeah. And so, yeah, they had a big painting party. Everybody in the community was excited. They're ready to really take occupancy on the first phase of the school. Before they did, they wanted to put their touch on it, right? The community did, and they picked out a nice yellow color, painted the school, had a ceremony, and you know, and now we're occupying it and using it in the early stages. So we are now moving on to phase 2. So that is, the design is nearly complete, and we will be continuing construction here as we in the near future. We did submit, so working with Chanhassen, we did submit for a district grant to support this project. But unfortunately, there actually is a little bit of a change in approach in how the district is doing grants these days. And so our project was deemed ineligible. So we are kind of pivoting a little bit on that and trying to kind of work up the funding. And I'll explain that in a second, but can certainly kind of, you know, if anybody has questions on that, happy to answer them. But phase 2 is there. So what is phase 2? It's the 2 classrooms, which will be about a cost of $30,000. And then the athletic court, which we're projecting to be about a cost of $10,000. As we've kind of, if you see from the photo there, you know, that's kind of a nice shot. I mean, that's where that sport court will be. Basically where the photo was taken is where those additional classrooms would be. And what's not, it doesn't quite drop off like a cliff right there. There's actually maybe on the very corner, but it's not as bad. So there should be good space. They might need to build a fence to keep the balls from rolling down the hill. But yeah. And so I think I think for some context, you know, the biggest challenges we had with kind of continuing our model of using district grants to support our projects. One, there's kind of a $30,000 cap on those. And I think previous guidance had been find a piece of our project to allocate $30,000. That was the approach we used on phase 1. I think the guidance now from the grant committee is more black and white. If your project's over $30,000, it's not eligible. And so this one at the cost, our projects are just at a scale where that isn't going to work. And then there's also some requirements on phasing. And so because this was a second phase, it was determined not eligible either. So that being said, we're still proceeding, right? And we are working with our Rotary partners to continue on this project. So it's my understanding that the City of Lakes has allocated $2,000 to this project and will still be donating, which I'm seeing some head nodding. So thank you. That's awesome. We really appreciate that. And then all the other clubs that had been working with us on our grant have, you know, basically said, yeah, we'll continue to donate. And so our hope is, you know, we'll probably get to about $10,000 from Rotary. And then as you saw, we have a really robust fundraising system ourselves. And so we'll help to cover that difference. And I think one of the things, I had lunch with Bill the other day, and I think we're looking to the future. What the guidance from the committee was focus on global grants. So I think, you know, we'll look at more at those and how that can be leveraged on our projects. So, and that's part of the reason that I joined Chanhassen, was just to get a better understanding of how Rotary and EWB can work together. And then quickly, I'm not sure where I'm at on time, but we try to be 8:30 or okay. Yeah. So I'll go through this quick and maybe leave a minute or two for questions if we can, or I'll be around after. But our next big project is the Santa Elena Water Project. So this is one, you can see that timeline. I checked that last night and we are still on schedule, which is awesome. So we adopted this project in February of last year. Last summer we traveled. I'm going to share some really cool stuff. We used technology to the max. Like we took everything we know about doing large wind and solar projects across the US using drones, using satellite GPS and all of that, and then tried to scale that to what is a really large water distribution project. And so I think this one is really going to be a flagship project for us in the long term, and hopefully a model for how we can do, really efficient engineering on these projects and deploy a really good solution for the community. 130 houses, 158 families, almost 800 people that this system is going to benefit. So at a cost of around 120,000 is what we're expecting. This is the community. It's actually really close. As the crow flies, really close to that first school project I showed you. It's actually within that municipality. But it's a pretty wide reaching system, but we've got a good plan for how it'll set up. The nice part is the municipality has made the investment to put the well in. This was about $150,000 investment that we didn't have to cover, and we're going to build the system to go from there. This team traveled. That's the travel team. That's them in Antigua. Pictures from the field, the drones, the GPS, that's what, the output looks like, this elevation model from the aerial survey. And then, big thing that they did was mapping. They had to visit every home to determine, where do you want your water? What type of water type do you want? Like working through the details, building that survey to make sure that's what the community all wanted. Here we are at the end.
One question. We got time for one question.
Sorry, I didn't leave you much, so hopefully I covered most of them.
You must have answered them all. Matt, here is a book, My Father's Dragon.
Awesome.
We would like you to sign.
Okay.
And that will then be donated to a student at Beat the Grove. You get to keep that. Sweet. And it was very interesting to see where our dollars go and what happens, who actually does the work.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you all. We really appreciate all your support. So.
And with that, I want to thank an amazing group of people that gets these meetings together. Like they say, it takes a village. And my personal hero is Greg, who comes in super early and gets all the tech stuff set up. Bless your heart, Greg. And Tom, who was our greeter today, Tony, for that reflection about being kind, a message we can take easily into our work and our week. Jennifer for turning 50 and doing our happy box. And Stephen for great chair, Brock, and Brian, who's taking on helping with a tech role today, starting out. And our club administrators, as always, Black Diamond, and Steve, who also did our microphone. Thank you. And let's see, with that, I think just remember to sign up for the duty roster when you get that from Steve. Sign up for the Sunrise Forum, and don't forget about curling on Saturday afternoon. And with that, have a great Rotary week.